Okay, so I'm gonna make a few really quick videos for techniques that you might want to use for your negative painting. So one thing you can do is just simply trace either your actual object or your stencil that you made. So if you made a stencil, right, you could either trace the, the negative, or you could trace the positive. Keep in mind that if you're using leaves, that they might be a little wobbly, so you might have to kind of hold them down. And then I would suggest tracing them with a very light pencil. I'm using like a 4H pencil, but if you don't have drawing pencils, maybe what you want to do is grab an HB pencil and just press really lightly. So that's obviously one very simple method, and you can pretty much decide how specific you want to be. So like if I want to do all the little bumps, I can include as many of those as possible. If I want to be a little bit more simplistic, I can go a little bit faster so that there's less of them. And if you really wanted to incorporate some of the other details, you could just then hold it, side by side, and then put in details like the veins and whatnot. But you want to make sure that you're not being too simplistic, that you really kind of take your time if you're going to put in some of that detail that you see. Right, so don't, make it too generic and too simple. And then you just continue to do that through your whole composition. One of the things that I would probably suggest is that you could wait to trace your next layer if you wanted to after you actually painted it once or twice. But if you're using something like leaves and we know that they're going to start to dry out, you could just trace them all at once so that you preserve them, or you'll have to go back out and grab other leaves. You just want to make sure that you keep in mind where your imagery is going to be and at what layer. So it's a little bit harder to keep track of, but it will be fine as well. The next method I'm going to show you is to basically use a sponge to sponge around your shape, so you would actually have to use the leaf in order to do this technique. I didn't like this painting, so I'm going to add it here. So to kind of keep with the color scheme, I used some violets in here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and activate some violet, and I'm going to put it in my mixing tray so I have kind of a bigger space for this. So my mixing tray is that plastic plate. You can use like a plate at home as well. And I'm actually going to add a little bit of yellow to it because I want to dull it down. So if you look at your glaze chart, you can see, because they're opposites on the color wheel, they make kind of a brownish color. I just don't want this to be too bright, right? So I kind of make a bunch of that color. And I actually might even need to make a little bit more. Okay, so then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use the sponge that's already dirty. I'm gonna kind of fill it with some of this color. And so then what I can do is sponge it through my leaf. And, I might have to pick some more up. And I don't have a lot of paint down here, so I might have to do this in a few layers, but you can basically see that it's keeping the silhouette of it. So since that didn't work very well, just basically need more paint, I'm gonna go ahead and make some more paint. This is something you might run into too, so you can be a little flexible with this. Now I filled that up really thick with paint, so you can see it's a little bit more solid this time, which is okay because I can always, right, go back into this and add more color if I really wanted to. So like, let's say when this dries, I want to even go darker, right? I could take some violet, and maybe this time I don't add any yellow to it. Maybe I add a little bit of the indigo blue to kind of make a blue-violet color. That's a little bit darker, so we always start dark and work light. You know, put a little ultramarine blue in that, I think. Make it even a little bit more. Right. And so then this time, you know, lay my stencil back on top as well. Right. Try to see if this is a little bit darker. So instead of using an area that's already really wet, I'm gonna go ahead and just blot just a little bit of it. And then I can make it get even darker to really emphasize that silhouette. If you have like a natural sponge, this will work even better. But I know many of you won't have a natural sponge at home. Right, so that's a great way of showing texture. And then you can always go back in and add some details to it if you want to, or to paint over. You can just glaze and kind of crisp up those edges. But I'm gonna wait for this to dry because I don't wanna do that and then have it smear. Okay, so remember that once something is dry, you can continue to work on layering it. So if you wanna go in here and like make this more crisp, or you wanna give it some more depth, feel free to go back in and work on the negative space. So here what I've done is I've made like a wash of orange, and I'm going to go ahead and go in there and kind of darken right on top. And I'm not doing a lot to it, so I can kind of crisp up the edges. I want to make sure that I'm not scrubbing it so that I'm not losing the texture of that sponge. And I can, you know, do even a gradation here if I wanted to, so I could make it maybe darker on the edge. And then add some water and kind of pull it up so that it gets more defined. So see how much more interesting it becomes when you start to layer colors rather than just leaving and using the same color over and over again. You can really see that when you repeat the colors, it's really going to unify the entire painting. This next video is where we're going to paint color, and we're going to actually print the actual leaf. So I would put your leaf in a plate so that you don't make a mess with it, and you want to print or paint your color on the back side of your leaf. That tends to be where the texture is. So you really kind of want to emphasize on where the veins are. I'm just looking to see if I have some other ones that might work well. I can try a few different leaves here. So I think we more than likely want to do this while it's still wet. So you can go ahead and take it, and you would have this already on top of your base layer. So I'm just using some leftover paper. And then what you do is just press it onto the surface and hopefully get a leaf to print out, right? And this is going to create some texture. Let's try this one. That one's maybe a little less successful because it's kind of a baby one. It didn't have a lot of veins to it. So maybe something that's a little bit bigger and grown would actually work a little bit better.